Dracula was real, just not a blood-sucking vampire. Instead, the real Dracula liked to kill his enemies by impaling them. You know, preferably by shoving a stick up their ass which crushed through their organs as it shoved its way back out through their mouth. Oh, and Dracula kept them alive like that for up to 3 days. But girls, if that worries you, do not fear. In the case of women, Dracula would make an exception and use the other hole, for convenience. In total, Vlad Dracula was said to have impaled over 30,000 people, earning him the nickname Vlad the Impaler, which is a huge copyright issue because that just so happens to be the nickname I gave my little man down south. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm laying. You know I'm talking about, dog.
But this is no time for childish jokes because we're talking about one of history's most evil men ever, who many claimed was the devil reincarnated. Or we're talking about one of Europe's greatest heroes, a military genius that single-handedly protected his tiny country of Wallachia against the mighty Ottoman Empire and is celebrated in Romania to this day. Well, like all things in life, it depends on which side you're on, which winner wrote history, or which culture and religion influenced those writings. But me, I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I only care about the truth, and the truth is that Dracula's story starts simple, like most stories do, with a woman wondering,
could I be pregnant? Am I pregnant?
And the answer was yes. But the problem is we don't know which woman was pregnant with little Dracula. You see, Papa Dracula, whose actual name was Vlad II, did have a wife, the princess to be exact, since Vlad II was Prince Vlad II, heir to the throne of Wallachia. So as a prince, Vlad Deuces liked to put his little impaler in as many mistresses as possible, and any of them could have been the mother to one of his 5 children, or all of his 5 children, children of which only 2 are important, Radu and his brother. A brother that would go on to become known as Vlad Dracula and Vlad the Impaler, but for now was simply known as Vlad III. Now, you have to know that for Papa Vlad, one thing was more important than anything else in this world, and that one thing was watching Castlevania on Netflix, because, I mean, it was literally inspired by his family name, Dracula. But the problem was that Netflix at the time, and we're talking about the 15th century after all, wasn't available in Wallachia until Vlad started using Surfshark, because Surfshark's VPN allowed him to access Netflix from over 100 locations. So if you can't access something because it's blocked in your country, use Surfshark's VPN. I mean, check it. Here's Netflix in Belgium, and as you can see, no Batman movie. Now I'm using Surfshark to switch to Germany, and Batman movie.
Oh my God! Wow!
Of course, there are many other VPN services, but the free ones are just free because they do scammy stuff with your data and privacy, and other premium ones are super expensive, but with my special briefed Surfshark link, you get a ridiculously good offer. Over 24 months, Surfshark's premium VPN is usually $432 in total. With my link in the description, you only pay $55 in total for 2 years of VPN. That's only $199 a month. That's damn near free. And then they throw in 4 months extra on top for free, because they're just gangster like that.
Forget about it.
And Surfshark's VPN is not just there to access Netflix. Nah, there's more. For example, if you're using a public Wi-Fi, like in a hotel, and you want to watch porn, and you want to access important data on your laptop, classified websites, protect your documents, whatever, you can add an extra layer of protection by accessing the public Wi-Fi through Surfshark's security filter to protect your privacy. And of course, to access stuff that's blocked on the public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Shout out to Surfshark for allowing me to make that joke. They could have asked me to cut that, but they let me do it, and just for that I think they deserve that you click the link in my description below, get unrestricted and safe access to the internet for only $2 a month. And if you don't like it, 30-day money-back guarantee, but after 30 days I guarantee you'll love Surfshark anyway, like Papa Vlad did. And once he finished binge-watching Castlevania, he remembered that there was something more important that he should be watching and protecting.
His family.
To Papa Vlad, the Dracula family name, the family honor, family empire in its protection, that meant everything, and Papa Vlad dedicated his life to that by joining a Hungarian order of Christian knights that pledged itself to Hungary and its neighbors, which included Wallachia, from all those who would dare to invade. That knightly order was called the Order of the Dragon, where Papa Vlad became quite the important knight, defending his home and Christianity against the Islamic Ottoman Empire that was about to take over all of Europe at the time, with that time being the year 1431. In fact, Papa Vlad became such a badass dragon knight that people started calling him Vlad Dracula, derived from the ancient word for dragon, which was Drac, hence why we now remember the family name as Dracula. Eventually, Vlad Dracula's time as a knight bro came to an end once it was time to claim his birthright. In 1436, he ascended to the throne and brought his children, Vlad III and his younger brother Radu, with him to the capital, and now it was time to fully dedicate himself to his duty to fight the Ottoman Empire, more importantly, to protect the only thing that matters:
family.
So when Hungary invaded Wallachia in 1442 and kicked Papa Vlad off the throne, Papa Vlad ran to the Ottoman Empire, made a deal with their Sultan to help him get the throne back, and then gave the Sultan his children as hostages to prove his loyalty.
Family.
Papa Vlad, the family man who cheated on his wife so many times he doesn't know who the mother of his children is, left those children with his family's long sworn enemy, children that at this point were 11 and 4 years old. Of course, the enemy, the Ottoman Empire, valued such hostages. In this era, having princes as hostages was everything. So even in captivity, the two brothers lived well. They were treated with care because the Ottomans knew that if they can turn a king to their ways, to their culture, they might just have a powerful ally, or better yet, a puppet king down the line. So Vlad III and his brother Radu got the best education the Ottoman Empire had to offer. Like, seriously, they got the whole superhero training arc. They were taught science, math, geography, culture, philosophy, taught to speak several languages fluently, including, of course, Turkish, since that's what the Ottoman Empire was. And with that, of course, also the teachings of the Quran. And on top of that, they got training in horse riding and combat training. Man, it was basically Dracula Begins. You get me? But the two brothers emerged out of their training arc differently. 11-year-old Vlad III resisted the Turkish delights at every turn. The code of honor his dishonorable dad instilled in him ran too deep. Little 12-year-old Vlad lived for his family name, his roots, his bloodline, his culture, and he would choose death before dishonor any day, twice on Sunday. And his brother Radu, though, completely took to the Turkish ways, converted to Islam, and eventually accepted a position in the Ottoman Empire's court. And reputable historians nowadays accurately sum the two Dracula brothers up like this: Radu was a bitch and Vlad was him. And while I did say that princes were treated well, and this is true, Vlad the Him did of course get punished for his constant revolting and his hatred towards the Turkish. They tried to whip the honor out of little Vlad, but not Vlad. This guy was on some Kunta Kinte thing, never forgetting his roots. You get me, bruv?
I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
Meanwhile, his actual roots, Mr. Family, Papa Vlad, at least got what he sold his soul and his children for. With the help of the Ottoman Empire and their army, he defeated the Hungarians and got his throne back in 1443. And then in 1447, Papa Vlad lost the throne again and was killed. In fact, Papa Vlad was killed by the very same Hungarians who first took the throne from him, Hungarians that were led by a man named John Hunyadi, who once again attacked to put his own ruler on the throne. And at this point, I have to explain something to you and apologize to Papa Vlad, because Vlad Dusis wasn't as dishonorable as I made it seem. He was just in a tough position. Wallachia was a tiny country surrounded by the very large and powerful Hungary and the even larger and more powerful Ottoman Empire. Technically, Wallachia as a whole was more aligned with Hungary, but within Wallachia itself, ancient families constantly had beef over who would sit on the throne and tried to ally themselves with either powerful neighbor to gain an advantage in the Wallachian Game of Thrones. So Papa Vlad had to fight off these threats, and for that he constantly had to play nice with either Hungary or the Ottoman Empire, and whichever side he chose, the other side hated him for it. In the end, that got him killed by the Hungarians, and now Wallachia's throne was empty, and both Hungary and the Ottoman Empire wanted to install a ruler that would support them to gain control over Wallachia. You with me? So the leader of all the military efforts for the Hungarians was John Hunyadi, who I'll talk about more later. For now, just know that after he now sacked Papa Vlad and got him killed, he installed his own pro-Hungary ruler on the throne of Wallachia. The rightful heir to the throne, though, was of course little Vlad, currently a hostage of the Ottoman Empire and currently also not so little anymore, but rather a 16-year-old. Vlad the teenager had grown up at the Ottoman court, but never forgot his honor and never forgot his heritage and never forgot that he was the heir to the throne. So now that he was called upon to take back his home country and defeat the Hungarian usurper, Vlad the teenager, man, he was like,
I ain't know my daddy, but I'm sure I shot out of his dick ready.
Of course, 16-year-olds can't really take back a throne by themselves, and of course the Ottomans still hoped that they would somehow groom this young man. They failed to impress and convince him during his 5 years at the court, but maybe if they help him get the throne back now, Vlad the teenager would forget that the Ottoman Empire is a sworn enemy and remember them as an ally, aka maybe he could still become a puppet ruler ruling Wallachia in the name of the Ottoman Empire. So the Turks helped Vlad the teenager take his rightful place back on the throne, which means at 16 years old, Vlad had one of the world's largest empires as backup to get his throne back. I mean, how gangster is that? At 16, my biggest concern was finding porn on the internet without my parents finding out. In 1448, the Ottoman Empire and Vlad the teenager made quick work of the Hungarians occupying Wallachia, and the Turks kept their word and left the throne for Vlad the teenager. And the boy sat down on that thing and then 1 month later, John Hunyadi and the Hungarians attacked again, and Vlad the teenager had to flee Wallachia to survive. Damn, these Hungarians, man. They're like me at 16 once I discovered how I could clear my browsing history. Relentless. So the Hungarians drove Vlad the teenager out of his home and all the way to Moldova, where Vlad luckily had something that would keep him safe.
Family.
To be precise, that family was his uncle, Bogdan II. Vlad the teenager found a way away from home in Moldova with his uncle, until Uncle Bogdan was assassinated by another uncle 3 years later. Family. So now in 1451, Vlad, the now almost not a teenager anymore, was on the run again, and he took his now fatherless cousin, Prince Stephen of Moldova, with him to find new refuge. And the man they went to for help was none other than one of Hungary's greatest warriors and the very man who chased Vlad's father off the throne, and then Vlad, the almost not a teenager anymore, himself off the throne. They went to seek help from John Hunyadi. Now you must be like, wait, Brief, that doesn't make any sense. The man literally recently tried to kill all of the Vlads. And that's true, but also the whole dynamic between Wallachia, Hungary, Moldova, Transylvania, all these countries at the time is really complicated, but to extremely oversimplify it, just understand this. These countries generally had one common cause and one common enemy that was bigger than all their infighting. The common cause was Christianity as a whole, and the common enemy was Islam, aka the Ottoman Empire that was threatening to take over all of Europe and impose its culture on the Christian lands. And while Hungary was pretty big and led in warfare by a bad man in John Hunyadi, the Ottoman Empire was bigger and badder. So after John Hunyadi put Wallachia's new Hungarian Christian ruler on the throne, a ruler that was meant to aid Hungary and Hunyadi against the Ottoman Empire, that new ruler decided that now that he's in control of Wallachia, he'd rather align himself with the more powerful Ottoman Empire and even helped them attack Christian and Eastern European neighbor Transylvania. To John Hunyadi, that was betrayal of the highest order, and it didn't matter that he might have helped this guy take the throne. Now, Hunyadi wanted him dead. So it was time for someone new to be in charge of Wallachia, someone with a will strong enough to not be seduced by the Ottoman Empire. And Hunyadi had heard that Vlad, the almost not a teenager anymore, was once given away as a hostage to the Ottoman Empire by his traitor dad. He had also heard that Vlad, the almost not a teenager anymore, was resisting the Ottoman Empire's temptations even though he was just a child at the time, and that he truly hated him. Hunyadi had of course also heard that Vlad, the then still a teenager, used the Ottoman Empire to get his throne back, but Hunyadi was the one who invaded Wallachia and kicked Vlad off the throne in the first place, so he couldn't really say anything about that. All that mattered was that John Hunyadi and Vlad agreed that the Ottoman Empire was the enemy. So when John Hunyadi looked at Vlad, the almost not a teenager anymore, he saw a man of honor. And so he took Vlad, the man of honor, under his wing and protection so that he could shape him into a powerful warrior and an honorable ruler that would defend the throne of Wallachia alongside its neighboring lands against the foreign invaders, against the Ottoman Empire. And if it wasn't clear from the fact that John Hunyadi literally usurped the Wallachian throne 3 times now without ever even sitting on it, just choosing rulers, Hunyadi was a straight up
dog. He's a straight DAWG.
The man was pulling the strings in Eastern Europe, but just chose the battlefield over the throne. Hunyadi was a legendary warrior with principles and a faith so strong that he was willing to burn countries down for it, and a hatred for the Ottoman Empire so great that he murdered so many Turks over his wars against them that his nickname had simply become the Turk Buster. So this living legend and terror of the Ottoman Empire was now in charge of Vlad's new training arc over the next years, and he turned the boy with a chip on his shoulder into the champion of Eastern Europe. Two years went by, and now in 1453 the Ottoman Empire just put the final nail in the already closed coffin that was the Roman Empire. They conquered Constantinople and were now the top dog in Europe. But little did they know that somewhere in Hungary, Vlad the Trainee had just completed his training arc with their feared longtime enemy John Hunyadi. Little did they know that Vlad, not a trainee anymore, was now leading an army made up of his mentor Hunyadi's men, his cousin Prince Stephen's men, and men loyal to the Dracula family to take back his throne. And in fact, man, Vlad and the army walked into Wallachia with such overwhelming numbers that he could have just taken the throne from the usurper, but no. If you ever know anime, you know where this is going. Just to have his moment where he shows off that he became a man over the course of his training arc, to show off the fruits of his labor, Vlad the man challenged the usurper to a completely unnecessary one-on-one battle to the death over who gets to rule Wallachia. And then Vlad killed the usurper with his own 2 hands. And with that, in the tiny country of Wallachia, a new enemy of the Ottoman Empire was born, a man whose name would haunt the Turkish people in their nightmares for years to come. Once he got his throne back and truly began his reign of Wallachia, Vlad shed all former titles and would henceforth simply be known as Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler was in charge now, and he brought honor back to the Dracula name his father had stained, and order back to Wallachia, which had seen too many rulers come and go over the past decade. But what restoring order means to one man usually means death to a lot of others, and Vlad the Impaler immediately lived up to his new nickname, impaling everybody that even looked at him wrong. You remember that it was Hungarians led by John Hunyadi that had screwed his family over more than once, right? Hungarians that made deals with the powerful families within Wallachia that were against the rule of the Dracula family. And apart from Hunyadi, Vlad wasn't about to forgive anybody else, so it was time to weed out all the traitors. And Vlad sent spies all throughout his lands in other parts of Europe to find out who is and was plotting against him, working with the Ottoman Empire, and when he found them, man, Vlad turned into the Oprah of the 15th century. You get impaled, everybody got impaled, man. The guy had a whole list of traitors and their families, and he turned that list into an exclusive Easter dinner guest list, inviting them over for a holy feast on Easter, but instead of stuffing food in his guest's mouth, he stuffed sticks up their butts so that their organs would be pushed out of their mouths. He impaled all the treacherous men in front of their women and children, alive, so that their families can still see them twitching with organs and blood spilling out of them. Then he enslaved the women and children and had them renovate the castle that the usurper hadn't been taken proper care of, and once the castle was as good as new, Vlad impaled all the women and children too. Then, to make sure everybody stays in line and stays honorable, Vlad the Impaler laid out some strict moral codes for his country, and anyone who wasn't following the rules got impaled. Most of all, though, that meant killing off the people that Vlad considered to be the most dishonorable in all of Wallachia. People who break their wedding vows and beggars. The former were punished by the woman being impaled through her lady parts and having her breasts cut off so that the man she cheated with can eat them while she is still twitching on her stick, half alive, watching him eat her breasts. And then the man got impaled through the back door alongside her.
Brother,
As for the beggars, to Vlad, beggars were despicable and without honor because they were living off of the hard work of others. So on some real red wedding thing, Vlad invited all the beggars in the country to a feast in a wooden hall, and once they were done eating, he locked the hall and burned it down. And thus, no more beggars in Wallachia, just a bunch of faithfully married couples. As for his own honor, Vlad truly lived by it and hadn't forgotten that his cousin Stephen helped him get the throne of Wallachia back. So once Vlad was back in power and had an army to his call, he helped Stephen get the throne of Moldova back, and the two formed a small but powerful alliance against the Ottoman Empire and their quest to conquer all of Europe. But of course, Vlad Dracula and his allies weren't the only ones opposed to the hostile Islamic takeover that the Ottoman Empire was planning. Pope Pius II was unsurprisingly not a fan of Muslims, and in 1460 he called for a new crusade to destroy the Ottoman Empire. Yes, back then popes were out for blood, now they're just out for young boys. The plan was to have a 3-year crusade to purge Europe from the Ottomans, and the man who was appointed to lead this crusade and recruit other nations for this holy cause was none other than the son of Vlad Dracula's former warrior mentor, the son of legendary John Hunyadi, the son whose name was Matthias Corvinus. Hunyadi had since died, but his son Corvinus picked up where his father left off. Corvinus was his father's equal in greatness and influence, became the king of Hungary, and there was simply no better man to convince Europe's rulers to rise up and unite against the Ottoman Empire. So with his influence, no one listened to him. Nobody joined him. Everybody was way too scared of the Ottoman Empire. They preferred a comfortable life under Turkish rule, preferred paying a little bit of tribute rather than fighting wars constantly in which they would just lose anyway. So all denied Corvinus' call to arms. All except for one guy, Vlad Dracula. Not only did he still hate the Ottoman Empire and would jump at the chance to fight them anyway, he was also asked by the son of a man he literally owed his life and kingdom to. Honor demanded that Vlad Dracula joins this crusade, no matter how impossible the odds. So Dracula ended up being the only one to answer Corvinus' call to arms, which that obviously made him stand out. And once the Ottoman Empire heard that there was a crusade coming, they immediately knew that Wallachia was openly opposing them, and so they decided to put their meat on the table by attacking one of Walachia's allies, where they made it a point to murder one of Vlad's close friends, a Hungarian general that used to fight alongside Vlad and once helped him get his throne back. The Turks kidnapped Vlad's former brother-in-arms and then publicly sewed him in half. It was simply just a bloody spectacle, meant to get Vlad's attention and scare him out of the idea of openly opposing them, and to let him know that he'd be better off falling in line and paying tribute to the Ottoman Empire like everybody else. But, I mean, if you know anything about Vlad Dracula by now, you know he cares a little bit about honor, and these guys just brutally murdered his former brother-in-arms. Vlad wasn't just mad, he was livid. What the Ottomans did,
Unforgivable.
instead of scaring Vlad, all the Turks managed was for Vlad to decide he needs to show them how they prepare Turkish meat in Wallachia. Vlad the Impaler had some impaling to do. But the Ottoman Empire's current Sultan, Mehmed II, still thought he had made an impression on Vlad, and he sent an envoy to Wallachia to present Vlad with a written order that stated that Wallachia is now part of the Ottoman Empire, and as tribute, he demanded a bunch of gold and 500 Wallachian soldiers to join the Turkish army. But Vlad, man, he told the envoy that they can tell the Sultan that he can take that order, take it, shine it up real nice,
Turn that sumbitch sideways and stick it straight up. You can do it.
Then he demanded that the envoys lift their turbans in front of him to show some respect, but they refused, so he kind of impaled them. He had nails hammered through their turbans into their skulls. This was an act of war, and the Sultan now sent his army to seize the 500 Wallachian men and gold tribute he felt he was owed. But Vlad sent his army to meet the Sultan's army and seized more than 500 Turkish men and introduced their butts to long, greasy sticks. They got impaled. Then, while Vlad was at it and already smelling blood, him and his army continued towards Bulgaria and liberated cities from their Turkish occupiers. And Vlad wasn't just slick with grease on a stick. No, he was also a slick trickster when it came to warfare. You remember that the guys spent years at the Ottoman courts learning Turkish, right? Yeah, so Vlad now disguised himself and went up to the gates of the occupied cities, made up some random story in Turkish, and convinced the guards that he is one of them and that they should open the gates. And then Vlad's army rushed in, killed all the Turkish invaders, and impaled those that they didn't kill. This went on all over the country until February 1462, when Vlad proudly wrote a letter to Corvinus, bragging that I have killed peasant men and women, young and old, who lived in Oblukica and Novoselo, where the Danube flows into the sea, up to Rahova, which is located near Chile, the lower Danube, to such places as Samovid and Higen. Not sure if that's a letter proving his devotion to the crusade or his devotion to geography, but at least now we know exactly where Vlad did his murdering. Then he continued to write, we killed 23,884 Turks without counting those whom we burned in homes or the Turks whose heads were cut by our soldiers. Thus, Your Highness, you must know, I have broken the peace. First of all, how cold is that? To just end the letter with, yeah, I broke the peace. We're at war now. Sorry, what? Also, what's up with the very precise kill count? Like with the 88 at the end, you know, it's very precise, but somehow heads cut off by soldiers don't count. I mean, that sounds like prime kills to me. Vlad seriously underselling his KDA here. But anyway, as Julius Caesar once famously said, Iacta alea est. The die is cast. There was no going back now. War between tiny Wallachia and the massive Ottoman Empire was on. And so Sultan Mehmed sent 18,000 troops to Wallachia to destroy their port. But Vlad sent 30,000 men to destroy those 18,000 men and impale them. And at this point, Vlad Dracula, he was becoming a serious heroic figure all over Europe, because you have to understand that the Ottoman Empire was the Dawn Dada around these parts. But somehow this tiny nation of Wallachia, led by Vlad Dracula, was not only putting up a fight, but dominating the Turkish conquerors and disrespecting them while they were at it. To all those who opposed the Ottoman Empire's rule, Vlad Dracula was that dude, and to all Turks, Vlad Dracula was that dude that kept impaling them. So many Turkish people fled the European part of the Ottoman Empire for Anatolia, ran to get away from Vlad the Impaler and his fetish for putting greasy sticks through body holes. Sultan Mehmed had to do something. Vlad Dracula's existence was an insult to his and his empire's greatness, so Vlad was declared enemy number one, and the Sultan decided to personally come at Vlad with the full force of the Ottoman Empire. In the year 1462, he himself led 150,000 men in a mission that only had one objective: kill Vlad Dracula. And remember Vlad's younger brother Radu, the one reputable historians commonly refer to as a little bitch? Remember how he went over to the enemy side, took up a position in the Ottoman Empire and all that? Yeah, guess what? The little weasel was still on their side and now opposed his brother, joined the hunt to kill Vlad because Sultan Mehmed promised that he would get the throne of Wallachia once Vlad Dracula is dead. And now Vlad Dracula, he kind of had a problem. yeah, the man had become a living legend, but it's not like he had the legendary powers we attribute to Dracula now. For all his military accomplishments, he was just a man, and 150,000 soldiers coming to kill him, that's a lot of manpower. See, the problem was that those 30,000 men that Vlad last attacked the 18,000 Turkish soldiers with, that was Wallachia's entire army. 150,000 marching on him, that was literally a third of Wallachia's entire population at the time. But, huge Kardashian but incoming here, you can never count out Vlad Dracula. Man, this guy came at the Ottomans fearless, like...
I was born ready, motherfucker.
He knew which paths they had to take through these lands to get to him because these were his lands. They were foreigners. So Vlad Dracula used the scorched earth method to greet them. Any path they would take, any hospitable environment that they would use for shelter to gather resources from, he scorched it. He cleared out his people, cleared out the animals. Yeah, surprise, the dude who impales women and children actually cares for animals. He cleared everybody out, and all the Turkish army ever found were abandoned cities with no food, poisoned wells, poisoned water. Then, while they were already dealing with that, starving and suffering, Vlad used his knowledge of the lands to constantly prepare ambushes for them and used some serious guerrilla fighting tactics to bring their numbers down one ambush at a time. And on top of that, Vlad then sent men infested with the plague into the Ottoman Empire's encampments so that they infest the Ottoman army. And doing all of that, little by little, Vlad Dracula actually accomplished absolutely nothing. This isn't Rambo. You don't David this Goliath. You don't win against these numbers. 150,000 is just too many. And the Turkish army just kept on pushing through Vlad's little annoyances until they closed in on his castle. And Vlad had to flee into the mountains with 24,000 men, with the Turkish army surrounded and turned the tables on him. Now they just starved him out. Trapped in the mountains, they took his castle and were happy to just wait until Vlad and his men were dead. But you forgot the huge Kardashian lurking around the corner that you can never count out Vlad Dracula. Man, Vlad was up in these mountains still getting ready like...
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you.
You're locked in here with me!
Against all odds, he still found a way to fight back. Vlad Dracula disguised himself and all alone walked into the Turks' army encampment. And remember that this is the 15th century. It's not like they follow Vlad Dracula on Instagram and know exactly what he looks like. They had a rough idea at best. So a disguise will do wonders, especially when you speak fluent Turkish, like Vlad did. So he snuck into their camps, figured out their nightly guard routines, and located the tent of the Sultan. Then, in the night of June 17, 1462, him and his 24,000 men invaded the Turkish war camp and caught them perfectly by surprise, killing 15,000 Turkish in just 1 hour. And Vlad himself managed to fight his way into the Sultan's tent he had previously marked, ready to impale him and end the Ottoman Empire then and there. But he picked the wrong tent. That or the Sultan changed tents every night. Whatever the case, he wasn't in the tent. And so Vlad and his men had to return to the mountains having accomplished nothing. Sure, 15,000 dead is cool, but a drop in the ocean considering the size of the Ottoman Empire's army, and also Vlad lost 5,000 of his own men in the attack, so it was all for nothing. Or was it? Because it turns out that Sultan Mehmed II was rattled by this attack. He could have very well died that night, and he realized that Vlad was too unpredictable and too dangerous, and so he decided to accept defeat, pull back his troops, and leave Vlad and tiny Wallachia be. Or rather, he would have done that if it weren't for his generals convincing him that they don't have to defeat Vlad to defeat him, they just have to besiege his entire small country. And so the Turkish army withdrew from the castle siege, leaving just enough soldiers behind to make sure Vlad remains trapped in the mountains, and then they marched on Wallachia's capital, Targovishte. But when they got there, the whole city was abandoned. The only thing they found in Targovishte was a forest of sticks, a 200-mile-deep forest of 20,000 sticks decorated with the impaled bodies of 20,000 Turkish soldiers. Vlad Dracula, no chill. And the dude was vicious. And at that sight, the Turkish lost their fighting spirit. Once again, the Impaler was 3 steps ahead of them, and at this point, it is written that the Sultan couldn't help but be impressed and said, "A man who had done such things is worth much." And with that, he decided that he had enough of chasing Vlad Dracula. He was happy with Vlad just having retreated to the mountains and taking over the abandoned cities. Plus Vlad's scorched earth tactics had basically ruined Wallachia. What was left was not even worth having, so the Sultan left Vlad's bitch brother Radu behind with his own army to fulfill his promise to him. Radu was now in charge of Wallachia, or whatever was left of it. And with that, the Sultan and his Ottoman army left. But of course, Vlad Dracula hadn't given up and wasn't going to stay in the mountains forever. All he needed was a new army. And he was a hero all throughout Europe, had powerful allies like the son of his dear friend and mentor Hunyadi, the king of Hungary, Matthias Corvinus. So Vlad snuck out via the mountain paths in the night, snuck all the way to Hungary, where he met with Corvinus to come up with a plan to first get the throne of Wallachia back, and then make further moves against the Ottoman Empire. But then it happened. Betrayal. King Matthias Corvinus betrayed Vlad Dracula. Of course, a man like Vlad, who is bound by such a strong code of honor, instilled in him by the great John Hunyadi, could only be blindsided by Hunyadi's son not following that code of honor. Matthias Corvinus had since realized that when it came to the Ottoman Empire, you were either with them or your own empire would suffer forever. And Corvinus, he had ambitions of ruling a powerful, peaceful, prosperous, holy Hungarian empire. And I mean, to be fair, Corvinus did make a call for arms for Christian nations to rise up and help him take down the Ottoman Empire, but only Vlad and small Wallachia answered that call. That wasn't enough. For Hungary to have peace, they couldn't remain an enemy to the Ottoman Empire. And though it was never confirmed, historians believe that King Corvinus signed a secret peace treaty with Mehmed II so that Hungary can prosper and is no longer constantly invaded by or invading the neighboring Ottoman Empire. AKA Mad Dog Vlad Dracula coming in hot, ready to tear down the Ottoman Empire. Not exactly in the plans right now, bro. And so King Corvinus betrayed Vlad Dracula and took him hostage. A political hostage, to be fair, which, if you remember from Vlad's hostage situation as a child, meant that he was treated with all kinds of respect and given plenty of riches. This wasn't about prison cells and abuse. The point was not to hurt or torture or even kill Vlad Dracula. The point was that Corvinus wanted to keep Vlad confined within Hungary, alive and well, so that Vlad doesn't take back Wallachia and threaten the Hungarian peace with the Ottoman Empire. And should the need ever arise, Hungary could always put pressure on whoever rules Wallachia that they have the rightful heir in their possession. And so, to keep Vlad happy and maybe, hopefully, see a reason and play along with Corvinus' schemes one day, King Corvinus gave him everything. A fancy house, a beautiful wife that was actually the king's cousin and made Vlad Dracula even greater European royalty and nobility, and Corvinus also made him a general in the Hungarian army so that Vlad can live out his stick fetish, but do so in the service of Hungary and impale some of their enemies. But you know how the good old saying goes, you can take the stick out of a man's butt, but you can't make a man not want to put a stick up the butt of his bitch trader brother. Vlad Dracula was just playing along with Corvinus, playing nice, biding his time, and all he really wanted was to take Wallachia back from his dishonorable traitor brother Radu. And Vlad still had other powerful allies that wanted to see him rule Wallachia, like his cousin Stephen. Remember? The one Vlad helped take control of Moldova. Well, it turns out that Stephen turned into quite the legend himself, casually known as Stephen the Great nowadays. And he still hated the Ottoman Empire and actually went to war against Wallachia once Radu stole the throne from Vlad. In fact, while Vlad was prisoner in Hungary, Stephen the Great defeated Radu, and Radu fled Wallachia, leaving his wife and kids behind to be killed so that he can just save himself. But Stephen the Great's men caught up to Radu and killed him, meaning that both in life and in death, Radu truly lived up to his title.
I mean, is that true? Are you a little bitch?
With the Ottoman Empire's puppet ruler Radu defeated, Stephen the Great used his power and influence to get Vlad back on the throne of Wallachia in November 1476. But of course, Wallachia still didn't really have an army of its own anymore, and Radu recently losing a war to Stephen the Great with that army, that didn't exactly help. It was a nice gesture of Stephen the Great to return the favor and give his cousin Vlad the throne of Wallachia. But at this point, Vlad Dracula barely... he didn't have an army. 4,000 men, 5,000 at best. Not enough to hold a kingdom with, but Vlad Dracula always found a way to make the impossible possible. So even now, he kept on opposing the Ottoman Empire, who kept trying to take back Wallachia. He fought them with every tool at his disposal, and rumor has it that in one of those battles, just months after he got the throne back, Vlad Dracula once again disguised himself to invade the Ottoman Empire's war camp to try and somehow pull off a miracle victory against their overwhelming numbers. Except this time, Vlad Dracula's disguise was a little bit too good, and his own soldiers mistook him for a Turkish enemy and killed him. And thus ended the life of Vlad Dracula on December 14th in 1476 at age 45. And it should be noted that his death might have been a little bit less dramatic than that, and just maybe he was assassinated by the Ottoman Empire, by an assassin, or simply killed in battle. We don't know exactly. We don't even know his final resting place. All we know is that once Vlad Dracula, the nightmare of the Ottoman Empire, was dead, Sultan Mehmed II personally sent for his head and impaled it on a stick in Constantinople for all to see that Vlad Dracula was truly dead.